Joseph Stalin was arguably one of the most ruthless people in world history. And to define, the word ruthless means zero pity or compassion for others. December 18th, 1878. Iosif Vissarionovich Djougashvili, or more commonly known as Joseph Stalin, was born into a poor family in the peasant village of Gori, Georgia. Stalin's mother, a devout Orthodox Christian, enrolled him in church school, and Stalin later earned a scholarship to the Tiflis Theological Seminary in 1894. There, some of the socialist members introduced him to the writings of Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin, which deeply intrigued Stalin. He soon left school, and in 1902, he found himself working full-time in the SDLP, short for the Social Democratic Labor Party. 1917, the Russian Revolution. The imperial government collapsed. He was part of the newly founded Politburo, where he eventually oversaw the establishment of the Soviet Union in 1922, and Vladimir Lenin became the first leader. After years of Stalin's patience, Lenin passed away, and Stalin assumed the role as General Secretary of the USSR. Russia then was a nation comprised of mostly peasant farmers. In fact, over 80% of the Russian population lived in rural communities. Only then recently freed from serfdom, a form of the feudal system, most people were illiterate, could not receive urgent health care, and worked day and night on their strip of land and slept under their straw-roofed houses, comparable to middle-aged Western Europe. The challenges were tough, but Joseph Stalin modernized Russia by instituting a number of 5-year plans and withstanding Germany in World War II while his own people suffered. Prior to the first 5-year plan, the Soviet economy was primitive, mainly thanks to their ineffectiveness in the First World War, when industry in Russia employed not much more than 5% of the entire labor force and contributed to only about 1/5 of the national income. The Soviet Union still lagged behind the rest of Europe. In 1924, the USSR began to receive war threats from the rest of the Western world, including Great Britain, who were cutting off diplomatic and economic ties. The fear of war shook the country, igniting a desire for a modernized Soviet Union. The rapid modernization occurred between October 1928 and December 1932, which is said to be the most crucial time, the early 20th century, for industrial growth, which set the tone for what was to come. By quickening the pace, he expected high targets. Stalin demanded an 111% increase in coal production, a 200% increase in iron production, and a 335% increase. Considering the outrageous benchmarks, the plan progressed with seemingly positive results. In one of his speeches in 1931, he stated, "The pace must not be slackened. On the contrary, we must quicken it as much as it is within our powers and possibilities. To slacken the pace would mean to lag behind, and those who lag behind are beaten." Word spread throughout the nation, and everyone went to work. Slacking off was not an option. The period of the 5-year plan has been christened Russia's Iron Age. Iron symbolizes no less than the ruthlessness of the process. The bayonets, prison bars, rigid discipline, and unstinting force. The unyielding and unfeeling determination of those who directed the period. The Soviet Union was transformed into a crucible in which men and metals were melted down and reshaped in a cruel heat, with small regard for the human slag, illustrating how the country excelled greatly in areas where it previously struggled. Due to the increase in robust metals such as iron and steel, both utilized in construction, architecture began to evolve. From 1928 to 1940, The number of Soviet workers in industry, construction, and transport grew from 4.6 million to 12.6 million, and factory outputs soared. The cultural change, as well as the industrial change, was visual. Chimneys had begun to dominate horizons, once notable for their church domes. Scores of mammoth new enterprises were erected. However, the fate of the people of the Soviet Union, stringed with hardships, terror, and famine, told a different story. June 22nd, 1941. Germany officially declares war on the USSR. Stalin led the country to fend off the Nazis in the Second World War. But winning a great war requires a great sacrifice. A shocking estimate was made that 1 out of every 8 Soviet citizens alive in 1931 died during World War II. 97% of the males aged 17 to 20 died. 31,850 industrial enterprises were destroyed, and 30% of the Soviet national wealth was destroyed with it. Despite the population deficit and the hardships, the Soviet regime turned to the post-war prison camps for an answer to the loss of workers. Although the USSR lost an incredible measure of their population in the war, there were between 10 and 11 million Soviet men returning from the front to help rebuild, and they were joined by at least 2 million German prisoners of war, as well as around the same number of Soviet dissidents held prisoner in Stalin's Gulag army. At the Potsdam Conference in July and August 1945, the USSR received territory in Germany and utilized the industrial infrastructure by transferring it back to the mainland. Stalin also planned to implement another 3 5-year plans after the war to exceed pre-war production in pig iron, steel, coal, and oil by 1960. In a 1946 Stalin speech, he declared, "This unprecedented growth of industrial production cannot be regarded as the simple and ordinary development of a country from backwardness to progress. It was a leap by which our motherland became transformed from a backward country into an advanced country, from an agrarian into an industrial country." By the time of the death of Stalin in 1953, steel production was twice its 1940 level. The USSR was recovering, but increasingly closed off from the outside world. The process of modernization became entangled in conflicts with the West and the looming Cold War. Stalin proclaimed victory as the great multinational state grew stronger than ever during the war, reminding everyone that his 3 5-year plans had transformed the country from an agrarian into an industrial and military power. Through the modernization, Stalin is said to have been responsible for 6 million direct deaths, as well as an additional 3 million indirect deaths. Some peoples of modern Russia are still traumatized by the horrors of the Soviet leader. 5 leaders of Russia have ruled between Stalin and Vladimir Putin, and have each tried to lead the country away from Stalinism in their own different ways, including Nikita Khrushchev's secret speech to the Communist Party denouncing the horrors of the predecessor's rule. Today, Stalin's image has made a comeback under Vladimir Putin, who is said to have pulled from the playbook of Stalin. In a 2013 poll, more than 2/3 of Russians agreed with the statement that Stalin was a cruel, inhumane tyrant responsible for the death of millions of innocent people. However, in the same survey, 47% of respondents agreed that Stalin was a wise leader who brought the Soviet Union to might and prosperity. Through the vast modernizations and important victory proved to be considerable triumphs, they can never erase the disturbing tragedies that linger in the minds of the Russian people.